Welcome to the January Independent Taxpayers Oversight Committee meeting, and Happy New Year to everyone. I hope this year is a better year for everyone than last year. So I would like to thank staff for their efforts to pull this meeting together. And thank you everyone for being on the phone or the web and taking the time to join us today. So before we get started, is Jeff Schneider on?
No, Vice Chair House, he was not able to attend today due to a family emergency.
Okay, we do want to wish him well. He is a real estate and right-of-way expert, but we understand that he's moving to Washington State. Although his tenure was short, we do appreciate his time and participation on the ITOC meetings. So I would like to check with the clerk to see if we do have a quorum. Francesca?
Yes, Vice Chair, we do have a quorum.
Very good. Okay. And I would like to update the members of the public on our process for both members' public comments. The primary members will be using their cameras and will take live public comments. Members are asked to turn their cameras on when they have a comment or question. So this way we can identify you and be able to hear your comments. I will ask our committee liaison to provide a quick reminder on how the public comments will work. Ariana?
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair House. Well, I'll take a moment just to remind our members and the members of the public of the process for comments. The members will be using their cameras, as you mentioned, and we will take live public comments. Members are asked to turn on their cameras when they have a comment or question, and then either Vice Chair House or Chair Kenny will recognize you. As noted on the cover page of today's meeting agenda, in addition to emailing comments, the public may also provide live comments during today's meeting. And in order to provide those live comments, you can join the Zoom meeting through the link or by dialing one of the numbers from your phone that is provided on the cover page of today's meeting agenda. Join the meeting by clicking on the Join Webinar link provided in the confirmation email that you would receive upon registering. And when public comments are called for on an item on the Zoom platform, click on the raised hand icon in the Zoom toolbar, which is at the top right of the screen. And the chair will call on you by the name that you provided. If you're participating by telephone, please press *9 and the chair will call on you by the last 3 digits of your telephone number. The instructions for providing live comments are also on the bottom of the cover page of today's meeting agenda, and those can be accessed from the homepage of SANDAG's website at www.sandag.org. All comments, whether they're emailed or live, are going to be made a part of today's meeting record. Thank you, Vice Chair House.
Very good. Thank you, Ariana. Okay, so the first item on the agenda is approval of the meeting minutes. And are there any public comments on this item before we approve?
No, Vice Chair, I don't see any hands raised from the public.
Okay, may I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes? Dustin?
I will move to approve and or second.
Okay, I heard Stuart say as well. So Stuart, are you going ahead and seconding Dustin's motion?
If Dustin beat me, I'll happily second.
Okay, very good. Are there any comments by the ITOC committee members as well? If not, we will go ahead and take a vote.
Thank you, Vice Chair. For the record, from right-of-way acquisition, Jeff Schneider is absent. For licensed civil traffic engineer, Chair Kenny.
I approve, and thank you very much, Vice Chair, for handling my work while I logged in late, so thank you.
No problem. We'll finish the motion and then turn it over to you, Mike.
Thank you. And for contractor construction, I believe Brad Barnum might be absent as well, but just in case, I'll call on him. I believe he is absent. For biology environmental, Dustin Fuller.
Approved.
Thank you. For finance budgeting, Stuart Halpern. Stuart, I'm sorry, I think you're muted.
Approve.
Thank you. For licensed engineer Les Hopper.
Approve.
Thank you. And CEO Private Sector Vice Chair House.
Approved.
Thank you very much. And that does pass with those members present.
Okay, Mike, take it away.
Well, good morning, all. Thank you very much. That takes us to item number 2, which is public comment for any items that are not on the agenda. Francesca, do we have any members of the public who would like to speak?
No, Chair, I don't see any hands raised.
All right, we will close item number 2 and move on to item number 3, which is the executive director's report. Do we have the director this morning, or?
We don't.
Oh, we have Mr. Linthicum, sir. If you could provide us the report, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Happy New Year to everyone. And this is the first meeting of 2021 of the for ITOC, and so we have a lot to look forward to this year. We're very, very excited. Personally, and I think a lot of Sandag is excited about the Mid-Coast Trolley. It will open this fall. We're shooting for November. We're trying to nail down an exact date very, very soon, just because of the huge event requires a lot of planning. And I'm sure you all know that Mid-Coast will give the riders a one-seat trolley ride from the border to all the way to UC San Diego. Largest infrastructure project in this region, and it's on time and on budget. Some other things about 2021, the Board of Directors is set to adopt the regional plan in late fall. And this is based on the 5 big moves. This plan will be the culmination of 2 years of work using data-driven analytical approach, never used at Sandag before. And, you know, we're in a data-driven environment these days, and we're taking advantage of that, like I've said, like never before. The adoption will follow the regional plan's EIR, which we expect to have done in late summer. And we will continue to work with funding options for, you know, so many of these incredible projects that will come out of the regional plan by coordinating with state and federal agencies, as well as all our regional stakeholders. And hopefully, fingers crossed, we hope to meet in person sometime this year, and not only on Zoom. And we support any effort to ensure that the COVID-19 vaccine is successfully deployed region-wide. In fact, some of you might be aware, Sandag hosted a forum for the county to make sure that all the member agencies knew about the plan to distribute the vaccine. Okay, different subject. Since early December, staff has been working on a draft statement that outlines Sandag's commitment to equity in its projects, programs, and policies. And staff will bring that statement to the Board of Directors at its January 22nd meeting. We recently established our Employee Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council, known as the DEI Council. This council reviewed that statement and provided all their necessary input and insight. We shared the draft statement with our community-based organization working group last week, and we're incorporating their feedback. And our Social Services Transportation Advisory Committee will review the statement at its January 19th meeting. While words matter, we know that actions speak louder than words. This statement is only the beginning of our commitment to develop an equity action plan that will guide our work. And as an agency, Sandag has a responsibility to listen to the communities we serve, learn from that experience, and lead our region towards an inclusive and equitable future. And for that reason, we have also embarked on a coordinated effort to bridge the digital divide. Sandag's Director of Mobility and Innovation, Antoinette Meyer, is leading that effort to address this digital divide. And this is the gap. I'm sure you've heard this term. This is the gap between those who do and those who do not have reliable access to high-speed internet, computers, and smartphones. And much like the transportation system, the broadband system needs to be expanded into the communities that suffer without it. The team is developing a regional digital equity strategy and action plan that will speed up installation of broadband access through partnerships. And nothing more underscored the need for this effort than the COVID-19 pandemic. You know, lack of connectivity it puts residents in at a disadvantage when it comes to education, work, and travel. Many benefits to broadband access. It can also improve mobility and sustainability. Working from home could reduce car travel and greenhouse gas emissions. Reliable high-speed internet connections help local jurisdictions with the smart city. You've all heard about that, the smart city initiatives that many cities are doing across the nation, and improve operations, civic engagement, and traffic flow. And installing broadband, which is the high-speed internet connection, is critical to the future of our transportation system. And it is necessary so that all the communities will have access to opportunities. A digital divide task force made up of experts from the private sector and the government sector also has been established, and broadband data collection and research is underway. This research will identify broadband gaps into the San Diego region and best practices for expanding broadband access. We'll keep all of our committees and our board apprised of this work. And in that same vein, we're very pleased to announce that Sandag has been awarded a $9.3 million grant through the Federal Highway Administration's Advanced Transportation and Congestion Management Technologies Deployment Initiative, a mouthful. In total, FHWA awarded a little less than $50 million, $49.6 million to 10 projects across the country that, like Sandag, are using cutting-edge technology to improve mobility and safety for travel in America. So Sandag received the second highest amount of funding. It was the only agency in the state of California to get this funding, and we got about 20% of the national funding. So we knocked their socks off when it came to that application. The grant will partially fund a border region project that is part of a partnership between Sandag, Caltrans, the City of San Diego, the City of Chula Vista, MTS, and the Port of San Diego, and also private sector partners. The project will utilize technologies that make it safer and easier for people and goods to travel to and from and all around the border region. This first of its kind project will provide real-time traveler information, smart intersection, on-demand ride services, trip planning tools, and connected vehicle technology at the US-Mexican border, neighboring communities, and the employment centers down there at Otay Mesa, huge employment centers down there now. This is a great example to highlight the next operating system that's part of our data-driven regional plan. So this grant will help us build a national model, just like the 5 Big Moves is turning into a national model. This is such great news for the region and a much needed win for California. Again, we want to congratulate the Sandag and the regional team for securing this grant. And so, Chair Kenny, that concludes my report. And unless there's questions, I would like to turn it back to you.
Well, thank you very much. That is exciting about the grant. So well done. Top 10 projects in the nation. They must have been pretty impressed with the submittal. Are there any questions for Mr. Linthicum from the other members? And mind you, I have to scroll through everybody. I don't see any, but Ariana, maybe just help me out. Do you see anybody?
I do not see any hands raised.
Go to the gallery view. All right, there. I don't see anybody either. So, Mr. Linthicum, thank you very much for the presentation. And again, congratulations on the grant. We look forward to seeing a project established and set up. When might we see something in the way of activity on that?
Oh, that's a good question, because we would be coordinating that with our effort with Otay Mesa East and the new international border crossing and all the IT efforts that are needed there. So we don't have a construction schedule yet or in the field, but I'll tell you what, during the course of this meeting, I will try to find that out and let you know.
Okay, yeah, not necessarily referring to a construction schedule, but it'd be interesting to know when consultants are hired and plans are underway. It's always interesting to see how those things develop as well.
Yes.
So thanks again. With no more questions for Mr. Linthicum, we will receive your report and file it and move on to item number 4, which is the TransNet Smart Growth Incentive Program and Active Transportation Grant Program quarterly status update. Tracy, are you ready?
Chair Kenny.
Yes.
So items 4, 5, and 6 are all on your consent agenda for today's meeting.
Well
So,
done, Mike. You're
all
right.
staff, they're prepared to
All
answer.
right. So are there any questions for staff for item number 4, since I've gone ahead and laid that out? All right. On the other 2 items on consent, 5 or 6, are there any questions for staff? All right. Well, seeing none, we will go ahead and receive the entire consent calendar as information items and receive and file them. And thanks staff for their effort. And
Chair
move
Kenny,
on.
sorry, before we move on, if I could just acknowledge for the record that there were no public members or members of the public with their hand raised either.
All right. Thank you for that. All right. So we're going to start our action items, which would be item number 7. A report by Mr. Needham. Before we begin the report, do we have any members of the public who would like to speak on item number 7?
No, Chair, I don't see any hands.
Mr. Needham?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Just since your December 9th meeting, I just have a couple of updates. The Transportation Committee received the Smart Growth Incentive and Active Transportation, as well as the Environmental Mitigation Program, Land Management Grant Program updates. And then also the Transportation Committee and the board also heard the FASTAC Performance Management Safety Targets update that you received at your last meeting, as well as the draft 2021 RTIP presentation. And that's about it since your last meeting on December 9th. So.
All right, thank you for the update. Any questions for Mr. Needham from the committee? Seeing none, we will receive that report and file it. Thank you very much. And we will move on to item number 8, the update on the appointment of the subcommittee for the 2021 ITOC annual report. Ms. Barajas. But before we move on, perhaps we could check and see if there are any members of the public who would like to speak on item number 8.
No, Chair, I don't see any hands.
All right, Ms. Barajas.
Thank you. So good morning and Happy New Year, everyone. It's that time of year to start organizing for the ITOC's annual report and fiscal audit. This year, the annual report will also include the results of the fiscal year 2021 triennial performance audit. In previous years, the ITOC has elected to form a subcommittee to work with staff in drafting its annual report. This year, we will once again work with the consultant editor, Bruce Lieberman, and he's worked on our previous 2 annual reports. It's anticipated that the subcommittee could potentially meet toward the end of January or beginning of February to provide initial ideas on the report, content, and format. We also propose the subcommittee meet after each ITOC meeting, again as necessary, leading up to the approval of the draft and final annual report that would be presented to the full ITOC at the May and June ITOC meetings, as well as to the board at its June meeting. Attachment 1 to your report with last year's annual report is provided so that today you may share with us any initial feedback on what the report content and format for this year might include. So today, the action for you today is to appoint no more than 3 voting members, one of whom shall serve as the project manager for the project. So with that, do we have any volunteers?
Well, thank you, Ms. Barajas. All right, so we're looking for 3 committee members to staff this subcommittee. Colleagues? Ms. Barajas, who was on it last time?
That was Stuart Halpern, Dustin Fuller, and yourself.
Thank you. Well, I am happy to participate again for a little continuity. In general, we would like a newer member to also participate. So when that opportunity presents itself in a year from now, we still have that continuity. And anybody at all who we could
who
I'd
we
be
rely
happy
on?
to do it again.
Thank you, Mr. Halpern.
One question I had is, Julie, if you could just reference the time period for the work involved and how that does or doesn't fit with, you mentioned there were 2 members of the committee whose terms are expiring. Does that create an issue?
It doesn't really create an issue because I think that we're getting our final draft in May, which if anybody's terms expire at that time.
Got it. Thank you.
Kind of.
So 2 in hand. Les,
Yeah, I'd be happy to help out,
all
Mike.
right.
Just,
Thank you
make
very much.
If Dustin's moving away and can't continue, I'd be happy to jump in.
All right. And Francesca, does that take a vote or are we done on that issue?
Yes, Chair, we do vote to appoint.
All right. So we have 3 volunteers. Do I have a motion to appoint the volunteers?
I move to approve.
And a second?
I second that. Dustin Fuller.
Motion by Vice Chair House, second by Mr. Fuller. Francesca, can you call for the vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. For right-of-way acquisition, right-of-way acquisition is absent today. For licensed civil traffic engineer, Chair Kenny.
Approve.
Thank you. Contractor construction is also absent today. For biology environmental, Dustin Fuller.
Approve.
Thank you. For finance and budgeting, Stuart Halpern.
Approve.
Thank you. For licensed engineer, Les Hopper.
Approve.
Thank you. And for CEO private sector, Vice Chair House.
Approved.
Thank you. And that passes unanimously with those members present.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We're going to move on to item number 9 then, the TransNet Interfund loan. And this is a presentation by Ms. Fatisse. Ms. Fatisse.
Yes, good morning, Chair and committee members. As you may recall, through the last few months of 2020, SANDAG staff presented information to this committee, to the Transportation Committee, and the Board of Directors on short-term cash flow needs and a suite of options to address them. So one of the options that was recommended by our financial advisor was the use of interfund loans. And this is a strategy that helps internalize the risk of repayment, minimize borrowing costs by avoiding a third-party lender. And so today we're here to recommend and discuss specifically interfund loans between the local environmental mitigation program, or EMP, and the major corridor EMP. And we will be asking the Transportation Committee for a recommendation and the Board of Directors for authorization to execute interfund loans between the programs for up to $56 million that would be repaid with interest at the local agency investment fund, or LAIF rate, and reporting of loan balances would be included in the quarterly financial reports. So now I'd like to refer you to the report attachment, which is the TransNet flow of funds chart, and ask that that chart be shared on the screen. Ariana, is that chart available?
Yes, let me.
Okay, great.
Quick Kendall's got it.
Okay, yes, next slide then. Thank you. So the specific funds we'll be discussing are the EMP funds shown in the second and third boxes from the left here in that long row in the center of the chart. And the arrow is depicting the way the loans would work from the 1.8% local project EMP to what is currently labeled here as the 4.4% major project EMP. And then these interfund loans, they are allowed under Section 7 of the ordinance, and that the ordinance includes a requirement that the overall distribution of funds established in Section 4 be met over the life of the duration of the ordinance. And then these, the distribution is also reviewed as part of the 10-year comprehensive reviews. Section 4, however, actually joins the 38% major corridor capital project funding to the far left of that row, and the major corridor EMP into a single grouping at 42.4%. So no interest is required for the major corridor capital project program to advance funds for the major corridor project EMP. And that is a practice that has been ongoing since the early actions that were implemented for the Transnet extension ordinance. So the local EMP loan, however, would require interest to be calculated and paid in order to satisfy the Section 7 distribution requirements. The first 10-year comprehensive report or 10-year look back required by the ordinance was completed in 2018. And in Chapter 6 specifically, it was noted that the local EMP was significantly underutilized. Many local projects didn't require biological mitigation, and then where mitigation was required, oftentimes developers had taken the lead to fund that mitigation. So one suggestion in the report was for the SANDAG board to closely monitor that part of the ordinance and consider combining local and regional projects to maximize effective use of the funds. And that would still stay within the limits of the ordinance. The fiscal year 2018 Transnet Triennial Performance Audit also noted this underutilization, and recommendation 21 of that report recommended that SANDAG look at repurposing the local EMP funds as allowed under the ordinance. So kind of going back to what we reported in November, over the next 8 years, the major corridor EMP has a cash flow shortfall of about $56 million. And an interfund loan from the local EMP will help address this need. Loans from the local EMP, again, would be repaid when the major capital EMP fund becomes available starting in about 8 years. And this would help put these unused funds to use in the near term until a more permanent solution to the low use of the local EMP is approved. The current balance in the local EMP is about $51 million, but it does continue to grow as receipts are received for the Transnet program. Just so as mentioned, and just to recap, this particular strategy helps internalize the risk, helps reduce overall program costs by avoiding the third-party borrowing costs, helps address the cash flow needs in the major capital program as well, because the EMP would be borrowing from the local EMP instead of the major capital program, as has been the mechanism used to date. And then today, we're just asking the ITOC, well, presenting the information and entertaining any discussion on the proposal for these interfund loans up to $56 million starting in 8 years would be the repayment with interest calculated at the LAIF rate, and quarterly reports would include the loan balance. So any feedback that you provide today as requested would be conveyed to the Transportation Committee and Board of Directors when they hear this item later this weekend, next week.
All right, well, thank you very much, Ms. Fatisse. Before we take it up to committee for discussion, Francesca, are there any members of the public who'd like to speak on this issue?
No, Chair, I don't see any hands raised.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Don from the committee members?
I have a question.
Vice Chair House.
I didn't catch if this had already been done before in the past. Are there other outstanding balances that are going to be paid through this transaction?
Yeah, so we are specifically coming with this particular request for interfund loan from the local EMP to the major corridor EMP. The only other interfund loan that would be considered a loan is, as I mentioned, the major corridor capital project fund, the 38%, helped to fund the acceleration of the major corridor project EMP. But again, section 4 of the ordinance actually groups those two together under the major corridor program.
Okay.
So those are not tracked with interest.
Okay. Okay.
But yes, the 38% pot has been advancing funds to the 4.4% pot for quite some time.
Okay, but for the local project EMP, that's the first time this loan is taking place.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Halpern, your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you. So, you know, it seems like this makes perfect sense from a, efficient use of funds standpoint. But Dawn, maybe you could refresh my memory because I don't recall from prior conversation about the low utilization. You referenced that it's often the case that the local projects don't have the real need for these types of funds. Is that largely the case, or could there be any issues relating to localities' awareness of the availability of these kinds of funds, or their expertise in executing on projects which would be qualified, which qualify for these funds? Or is it really just that, when this was designed, people thought, well, we should have a little bit of a carve out, but it just turns out that it really isn't as relevant as people foresaw?
So, I believe it's a little bit of the latter, and maybe Ariana can help me in terms of the audit response, or Jose, but typically, right, these would be set up to provide for mitigation for local projects that would be, typically would be funded through the local street improvement funding program, which, as you're aware, has things like the 70-30 split. So maintenance is actually also eligible under that. So, it does seem that the types of projects implemented by the local agencies largely haven't required the type of biological mitigation that this, was well intentioned to fund. But I see Jose on the line.
Yeah, thank you, Don. So, and thank you for that question. So, when this issue was first raised by, the 10-year review and the triennial audits, we did make an additional effort to reach out to the local jurisdictions to make sure that they were aware of the availability of this funding pot. But one of the things that we found out is, as Don mentions, is that the types of projects that the local jurisdictions implement largely have not required this biological mitigation. And in those instances where it was required, oftentimes the developers would take care of that need. And so there just hasn't been a demand for this particular funding source. And so, as Dawn mentioned in her presentation, this does not necessarily provide a permanent solution to how these funds would be used. I think that's a pending question for the board that they would need to tackle. But at least for the time being, staff's proposal is to make use of those funds to alleviate some of the cash flow needs that we have for the Major Corridors program.
Well, thanks for that elaboration. Yeah, so again, to me, it just underscores that from efficient use of cash point of view, I don't think taxpayers want to see $50 million just sitting around when there are good uses for it. So,
correct. Yep.
Thank you.
All right, do we have any other questions from the committee members? All right, seeing none. So this is an information only item. We can simply receive and file it, or we can choose to make a motion or recommend to the Transportation Committee that they recommend. Is there any interest from any of the committee members to make a motion to that effect?
I would say this just seems to make so much sense. I don't doubt that the Transportation Committee would see that, but just for emphasis, again, for the sake of use of taxpayers' funds, I would propose that we actually formally recommend approval of this, even though we're not required to.
Well said. Mr. Fuller?
I would second that. I agree 100%.
And my understanding that was a motion and a second. Stuart?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Any discussion? Seeing none, Francesca, if you could call for the vote, please.
Thank you very much. Right-of-way acquisition is absent this morning. For licensed civil traffic engineer, Chair Kenny.
Approve.
Thank you. For contractor construction, contractor construction is absent this morning as well. For biology environmental, Dustin Fuller.
Approved.
Thank you. For finance budgeting, Stuart Halpern.
Approve.
Thank you. For licensed engineer, Les Hopper.
Approve.
Thank you. And for CEO private sector, Vice Chair House.
Approved.
Thank you very much. And that passes unanimously with those members present.
Thank you, Francesca. That moves us to item number 10, which I understand is also a presentation by Ms. Batiste. Don?
Yes, thank you. So item number 10 is a request from the County of San Diego to borrow $16 million in commercial paper for the Bradley Avenue Overpass Improvement Project. So as you're aware, SANDAG provides a commercial paper program for TransNet recipients to advance their program projects when it's deemed beneficial. And that program is set at about $100 million. So this particular project, as you can see on your screen, is a congestion relief project that includes widening Bradley Avenue in El Cajon from Magnolia Avenue to Mollison Avenue, and it includes the widening of a two-lane bridge over State Route 67. Attachment 1 of the report is the draft memorandum of agreement. And so just as a quick refresher again, when these requests are received from our local jurisdiction, we have a review process that has several steps. We do a capacity analysis, that's attachment 2 of your report. This helps us determine if there will be enough sales tax coming in to cover the repayment over the time period requested. This particular capacity analysis assumes a 10-year repayment period, and Rule 16 of Board Policy 31 requires repayment of CP principal within 5 years. But the county has requested an exception to this rule to allow for a 10-year repayment period. And this helps them meet the debt obligation while continuing to have enough TransNet funds to continue with other critical local street and road projects in their program. For the capacity analysis, we use a 2.5% rate of interest. The commercial paper is variable rate debt. So the actual rate that has to be covered would be the rate at the time the funds are used, plus some fees associated with the borrowing. The 2.5% rate has generally been higher than the fees plus interest that have been averaged through the program. So we set the rate a little bit high for the analysis to just assure that the repayment can be made. The next step is that the local jurisdictions council or board needs to approve the project through a resolution, and the resolutions included as attachment 3 to your report. It was approved on November 18th, 2020. We also do an analysis to make sure the project has met certain requirements and qualifies for use of the commercial paper program. That analysis is included in attachment 4 of the report. We consider things like whether the project is a congestion relief capital project. We look for the useful life to make sure it's longer than the repayment period. We make sure the local jurisdiction is in agreement with the repayment terms. And then we have council review to assure that we can maintain our tax exempt status on the commercial paper program. And then that brings us here to ITOC, where within the ordinance, the ITOC is required to review any proposed debt financings to assure the benefits of the proposed financing to accelerate delivery, avoid future cost escalation, and other related factors exceed the issuance and interest cost. And here the term benefits can also include community benefits as well as economic benefits. So this particular item is scheduled to be heard at the January 15th Transportation Committee meeting and subsequently at the January 22nd board meeting. And if approved, the commercial paper would be programmed in the 2021 RTIP that is scheduled to be approved by the Board of Directors at its February 26th, 2021 meeting. That concludes my report, but we have Bill Morgan and Jim Bowles from the County of San Diego available to address any project-specific questions. And I'll turn it back to you, Chair Kenny.
Well, thank you, Ms. Fatisse. Before we take it to committee for discussion, are there any members of the public who would like to speak on this issue?
No, Chair, we don't have any hands raised.
Thank you, Francesca. All right, up for to committee for discussion. Do we have any questions for Don from the committee members?
I do, Chair Kenny.
Les, thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, Don, and Jim, thanks for being on today. So I guess a question I'd have for this is, how far along is the project? Have studies been done, and has there been a risk assessment? And for the money requested, is that for construction costs only, or is that for additional studies? And, you know, I'm just not familiar with the project, so I don't know how far along in the process it is. Is it still in the environmental stage or in design stage? Just some more background on the project would be good.
Good morning, committee. This is Bill Morgan with the County of San Diego. Yes, the project's being built in two phases. So the portion to the east of Graves Avenue there, which is mainly the residential portion, is what I'd consider a Caltrans managed project. They're both being funded by the county managed project. They're both being funded by the county, but we're moving forward with that section to the east. We took it to our board earlier this year, and we'll be beginning construction the middle of this year with the improvements required for the residential side. The section over the freeway, we're assuming will begin around 2023, where we have a cooperative agreement with Caltrans. We're doing the review of the final design, but the environmental documents have all been completed. We're just moving into the final design phase on that one, and finalize all the right of way has been finalized. So it's on track to be delivered. We just had to break up the phasing because of the coordination with the funding and a few other factors that are involved. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Stuart?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I'm just, the question that just comes to mind, and I, again, apologize because I know we've talked about this in the past, I just don't recall. You know, this project takes, I think, about a third or so of the current availability under the commercial paper program. Dawn, or I don't know if Andre or Jose's on, refresh our memories as to how easy it would be to expand the commercial paper program. My understanding, or my vague recollection from prior discussion of this, is it's not so much a credit problem in terms of availability, but rather it was a board authorization thing, that where the authorization just happened to be set at this level. Just maybe walk us through if there are additional desires to fund additional projects using commercial paper, how quickly we can respond to that.
So thank you. That's a great question. So just to refresh, I think what we reported back in November when we discussed the NCTD commercial paper, we do have a verbal that the credit from our CP provider could be quite easily expanded. The level is set at 100 million. And so that was, expansion of the commercial paper was also one of the options in our cash flow presentation as well. So we are looking to come back in the springtime to request expansion of the commercial paper program. This particular draw on funds from the commercial paper program fits within the existing capacity and the balance outstanding. So since this is a rolling program, obviously folks who have already accessed are repaying principal as new draws are made. So we've run that analysis and we don't anticipate a problem with the draws and the draw schedules in the near term at all. There is the program actually needs to be renewed in the late fall regardless. So, you know, we would seek board approval to expand the program, but since there are fees with the amount of credit that's extended, just in, you know, to be prudent, we would not necessarily exercise that immediately until it's needed.
Got it. Thanks.
Vice Chair House.
That was my next question was, are you in talks with any other jurisdiction at this point that is looking to take advantage of the commercial paper?
Not that I am aware of.
Okay. And my question to Bill was, what's the total cost of this project that the county is actually funding?
The total cost for both phases is $42 million.
Okay, so the shortfall is just the 16 million. The rest of it is covered by the county.
Correct. Yes, 24 of it is being covered with our existing TransNet program funds, state and federal funding.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from committee members? Don, is the exception, the repayment exception, a unique feature of this application, or is that explicitly allowed by the ordinance?
Exceptions are allowed upon the board approval. I'm not sure if that is an explicit provision of the ordinance. I think it's more related to our borrowing policy. So that's really a board policy provision that is being, an exception is being requested for.
Fair enough. Any other questions? All right, we can, this is a discussion item, so we have an opportunity to make a motion to approve this or recommend approval to the board. Are there any committee members who'd like to make a motion?
I'd like to move.
A motion by Vice Chair, a second.
Second.
And a second by Chairman Halpern, or Committee Member Halpern. All right, Francesca, if you could call for the vote.
Thank you very much. For the record, right-of-way acquisition is absent today. For licensed civil traffic engineer, Chair Kenny.
Approve.
Thank you. For contractor construction is also absent this morning. For biology environmental, Dustin Fuller.
Approve.
Thank you. For finance and budgeting, Stuart Halpern.
Approve.
Thank you. For licensed engineer, Les Hopper.
Approve.
Thank you. And for CEO private sector, Vice Chair House.
Approve.
Thank you. And that passes with those members present.
All right, well, with that, I will thank Don and Bill. And Bill, it's good to see you again, friend from the county. We will move on to item number 11, which is the Mid-Coast Corridor update. Always an interesting presentation. I understand Mr. Castellum is going to be presenting. Greg?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. With the challenges presented in 2020 with the COVID pandemic, construction of the Mid-Coast Corridor Transit Project continues to make steady progress in a safe and efficient manner, keeping the project within budget and on schedule to open for revenue service later this year. In today's presentation, I will start with an overview on the progress of construction of the Mid-Coast project. take a look at some construction sites along the corridor, and provide a construction update of other regional projects concurrently being constructed within the Mid-Coast corridor. And in addition to the presentation today, we have included a Mid-Coast project fact sheet and a chronology summarizing past presentations to the ITOC as part of this item. So we'll move on to our next slide. And to the map to the right essentially shows the Mid-Coast corridor following along the Interstate 5 area. The corridor essentially connects the downtown area with the university community up in San Diego. The Mid-Coast project will provide an 11-mile extension of the Blue Line between Old Town and downtown. Will utilize the existing light rail system and make some minor improvements to handle the additional capacity that Mid-Coast trains will add to the system. And then the majority of the new infrastructure will start just a little north of the Old Town Transit Center and then continue all the way up through the I-5 corridor here. One of the things I'd like to note is that the project really utilizes the existing railroad corridor for the majority of the alignment through the Mission Valley area, or excuse me, the Pacific Beach and Claremont areas. And then it continues to north of State Route 52. We are going to be utilizing some of the Interstate 5 properties to accommodate our alignment up into the Nobel Station, the University of San Diego, the VA station, and then ultimately at its terminus point at the UTC Transit Center. So it's a number of stakeholders in play, and this project has had tremendous support from the City of San Diego, Caltrans, the VA health facility folks, and UC San Diego, as we continue to work together to construct and complete the construction of our Mid-Coast project. We'll be adding 9 new stations to our system, our trolley system. The project will add 36 more new trolley vehicles to the fleet that we currently have for MTS. And like I said, we're on schedule to start revenue operations in late 2021, which is this end of this year. The project is also financed. Our partner is Federal Transit Administration. They're participating in 48% of the funding of this $2.17 billion project. So one of the things I also want to kind of bring to the committee's attention is also that we are utilizing construction manager general contractor delivery method to deliver the Mid-Coast project. And in addition with the other regional projects, we've entered into a contract with the Mid-Coast Transit Constructors, who are a joint venture of Stacy and Whitback, Skanska, and Herzog Construction. And again, the collaboration and support from third parties has just been outstanding and really has benefited all the aspects that we've faced during the construction phase of this project. Moving on to our next slide. Here's a comparison of where we stand construction schedule-wise with what our original baseline for the project was. We basically have added 1 month of a duration to the actual heavy construction efforts. That was due to some changes that we've encountered in the field, as well as some inclement weather that we have experienced. A lot of the track construction has been completed. And our next real big phase that we're looking forward to is starting our testing and startup activities. So that is currently scheduled for June of this year. And final completion by the contractor is anticipated in September. So again, all of these are project milestones that are going to be coming up in the near future as we start winding up a lot of the construction. A lot of the infrastructure now will be focused, or a lot of the infrastructure of the project has been constructed, and now we are starting to complete the stations and having more focus on station construction and system development as we move forward. Next slide, please. One of the things that we're really happy about it is that here's a picture of our workforce summary. And basically 50% of our workforce is coming from our local folks here. Accounts for around over 2.5 million hours and roughly around $117.9 million being contributed to our local account economy due to the construction of the Midcoast project. A goal of 11.3% was set for our disadvantaged business enterprise utilization on Midcoast. As you can see here, the yellow bars and the red line were our projections and our plan on how we were intending to accomplish that goal. The blue line indicates actual where we are on the project, and we have already exceeded the goal. We're right now, our fourth quarter of 2020 indicated that we had a percentage of 12.76. So we're doing really well on tracking that effort. And another highlight of the project. Some of our accomplishments were definitely the construction of the Nobel Trolley Station parking structure. We initiated that last year, and we're just about ready to wrap that up and have that open for use in hopefully the next month or two. Construction keeps moving forward with that, and eventually final improvements for all the parking structure and adjacent surface lots will be completed in line with the opening of our trolley system. The trolley underpass at La Jolla Colony Drive is now complete. I'll be able to share a picture of that. Track placement is also completed. And again, we are really focusing now on getting our stations up and running and getting everything ready so that we can start doing testing that is necessary to move forward with moving trains on the tracks and getting that testing and everything for pre-revenue operations completed in time for our open for revenue service this year. We have also started a lot of landscaping efforts along the corridor that we'll be seeing. And as again, signal system work is on schedule as we move forward. Next slide. Here is an aerial photo of our first at-grade station. This is at Tecolote Light Rail Station. The platform station has been pretty much completed. We're starting to erect some of the canopy structure elements. As you can see, the parking facility is starting to take shape. We've had the initial AC lifts placed. We're doing some final improvements. We'll start moving forward with landscaping of those areas as well. And basically all the at-grade parking facilities will be providing for bike lockers, electric vehicle charging stations, certainly pedestrian circulation with local transit bus systems and park or drop-off areas as well. Next slide. This shows some pedestrian crossing work being finished up at the Claremont station. One of the things that we are working with private developers right across the Miranda Boulevard to help us provide the 150 parking stalls that will be supporting our transit users. And so we're working closely with his transit-oriented development and seeing how that continues to move forward. As part of his development, we are also working in mobility hub features such as pick-up and drop-off areas and next bus signage, as well as trolleys schedule information. So we'll continue to work with him as we complete that station. At the Balboa station, it's our third at-grade station. And as you can see here, you can start seeing the park and ride facilities start taking shape. We already have the access in place. And one of the additional features that the Balboa station brings is that we do have actual bus bays for buses to come in and serve all the adjacent communities. And we also have just to the north over Balboa, a pedestrian crossing so that it can facilitate any pedestrians that would be coming from the north side of Balboa Avenue to the station itself. So those are some of the other key features we have going on there. Our flyover is basically where the light rail system prior to this location here in just near the end of Santa Fe Street, we are on the east side of the railroad corridor. This flyover structure allows us to move our light rail system to the west side of the corridor and allows the low sand tracks to continue on in the eastbound direction. And then from this point on, then we will continue into the Interstate 5 corridor. The inset there kind of shows you a look of our light rail facilities. And then just to the left there, you'll see a nice sculptured retaining wall, and that is there to support the Rose Creek bike path that was constructed as part of the Midcoast project. Next slide. Here's a aerial shot of our underpass at La Jolla Colony Drive. The project is completely grade separated, and we also have a traction power substation there to the left. That is, as you can imagine, we are working very closely with the SDG&E to ensure that we have all the power necessary to start completing our testing and operations plan for the trolley system. So you'll be seeing that project will be, or the traction power substation will be energized within the next few weeks, and we'll continue to move forward with other locations throughout the corridor. The following, here's another shot within the undercrossing. It shows the center pier wall as well as the exterior walls and the track alignment. And then we also show some of the architectural feature applied to the retaining wall system as you continue north of the structured area. This is a view of our Nobel light rail station. It also shows the parking facility that we have constructed to the right of the station. And so we are continuing to progress with that. As I mentioned earlier, we're hoping to have that parking structure open for use. And once we have it open, then we're going to be able to transition into surface lot improvements, as well as completing some of the plaza improvements that are going to be supporting the light rail aerial structure and station. Here's a view looking northbound on to the VA station. This is to the right is a retaining wall that you can see from the Interstate 5 corridor. And you can see that we have already started some of the structural elements that will be supporting the canopies and the platform area work. You can see a lot of the where that worker is standing. There's a white tarp over a glass seated aggregate finish that has already been applied to the plaza area. So, and you can see that in the center, we already have our overhead catenary system and wiring and messenger wires in place at this location. This view is a southbound view overlooking the UC San Diego campus, and it shows the alignment coming from the VA. It has like a little bit of an S curve, comes into our next aerial station, which would be at Pepper Canyon. And as you can see, there's a lot of construction going on there. The viaduct is completed, as well as all the track work. And we're just about there with our overhead catenary system. The project will require a restoration of the field that you see there. We have a detour in place right now. One of the things that has been, again, really great support from UC San Diego. We've worked very closely in the development of the landscaping in this area, and at the base of the plaza area for this Pepper Canyon station, we have incorporated a bus turnaround area to facilitate drop-offs, as well as other UC San Diego transit facilities. And we will be also incorporating a roundabout intersection leading into the station. A lot of these improvements are also funded by UC San Diego. So at the end of the day, we're really going to have a really complete looking system that really benefits bicyclists as well as pedestrians, and serves the trolley station. Our next slide will show another view of this location. And one of the things that, again, our contractor has done just a really outstanding job. You can see that in the middle is the light rail station. To the left, you'll see our elevator towers. And then right to the left of that is a building that UC San Diego is having in construction. That building is like around 50 feet or so offset from our light rail viaduct system. And just the continued coordination there has been instrumental between all contractors involved to get this their project working and completed, which should be within the next few months. And then again, keeping us on schedule. To the right, all that area to the underneath the elevated or the aerial station, and to the right will be landscape as part of the Mid-Coast project. This next slide shows some flat work and some stairwell improvements being constructed at our Voight station. In the background, you can see the Zymed building, and behind that is the Scripps Memorial Hospital facility. This station will service all the research centers at the UC San Diego campus, as well as those adjacent medical facilities, and Preuss School, which is just across the way. In the background there, you can see a pedestrian bridge that will be also constructed to provide direct access to the Preuss School and adjacent properties to the north of Voight Drive. Here are some more plaza improvements being constructed at our Executive Drive trolley station. You can see the stairwells that we'll be providing there. And in the background is the elevator towers. And again, we're working directly with the developer at this site to go ahead, and once we complete some of the basic site improvements and pavers and whatnot, they're going to come in and do the landscaping. We entered into an agreement during our right-of-way negotiations, as that was something that the property owner really wanted to do to ensure that everything married well and certainly met the project's needs as well. So another good example of the collaboration on this project. And then this is our last station, the UTC Transit Center station. You can see the Transit Center directly in the center of this photo. To the left, you'll see some elevator systems and pedestrian walkways that lead to the aerial station that is down the middle of Genesee Avenue. And we've worked with both developers to locate these pedestrian access points and integrate it with their existing development. And we continue to do that with Westfield folks to the east of this corridor. We are now in the process of completing a design of a parking facility that will again accommodate at least 260 spaces for parking to support transit users in that area. We're anticipating construction will start within the next few months and hopefully be completed in line with the opening and revenue service start date later this year. On Project WIS, as we move forward to complete construction, we will continue to maintain the project risk and contingency management plan for the Mid-Coast project. We do project risk register is updated bi-monthly to track, monitor, and identify any new risks that we may be facing as we continue to move forward in other areas of construction. This table here kind of shows you some of our top risks that we have identified and will continue to monitor. One of the big ones is the right-of-way cost. A lot of our right-of-way certainly has been acquired to support construction, but we may have not completed settlement on all of those. And if there's as we continue to move forward in trying to reach agreements, some properties may end up going to trial. And so again, we continue to monitor costs, but at this point, we have identified what we think the actual estimate cost at completion will be and incorporating the budget, and we're still looking healthy on that front. Again, there's a couple other areas where we have right of way for there's potential goodwill claims could come at the completion of the project. That is where we don't have any federal participation supporting that effort. And again, we do have a budget associated with that, and we'll continue to watch, but we've been very proactive in being able to entertain some tenants of some of these properties and already come to an agreement and reach some settlement. So there would hopefully be no further potential for goodwill claims. So we're trying to be proactive on that, but there is always that potential risk there. As far as construction costs, we're continuing to monitor those, but again, we're moving really well. During this period, we've actually been able to accelerate some work this past year, and we will continue just to monitor that. And of course, there's always the unknowns that we may encounter during standard construction operations. And like I mentioned regarding COVID, certainly safety has been first. The contractor and his teams have done an exceptional job in ensuring that, everybody is safe. Another thing that we have also done is opened up a communication system with other adjacent development that's going on that we are interacting with, and our construction crews may be interacting with, whether it be on the UC San Diego campus, the VA campus, or private development. And so we have a system and a protocol that our developer has put in place to ensure that we have a high level of communication in case anybody should, potentially come in contact. And again, we would follow that protocol. Next slide. This slide shows a list of other projects that are concurrently being constructed through our CMGC program in the Mid-Coast Corridor. As noted on this slide, we completed the San Diego River Double Track project in February last year, and Elvira to Moreno Double Track was also completed in July. And those segments of the Low Sand Corridor now are open for operation. The I-5 Genesee Auxiliary Lane was completed this past October and is now open on the interstate, providing those improvements. And then we anticipate the Gilman Bridge being completely completed in February of this year. The Rose Creek Bikeway project is, and we anticipate completion in April, and the Voight Drive improvements are also anticipated to be completed in the fall of this year, in line with the Mid-Coast project. So as you can see, a lot of the corridor projects that we have invested in are now coming to very close completion of construction. We'll go through some quick slides here on these projects themselves. So next slide, please. This shows the double track efforts that were done at the San Diego River Double Track project. To the left are the light rail bridge facilities, and then to the right you can see the coaster already operating on the replaced bridge, and then just to the west of that was a brand new bridge that was constructed to complete that section of double tracking on our low sand system. Next slide. This shows some of the track work being constructed as part of the Elvira project. The Elvira project provided a double track system just a little bit south of Balboa Avenue and extended pretty much along to the flyover that we saw earlier. And it included bridge structures at Balboa Avenue and 3 crossings of the Rose Creek. And that is now open for operation. And again, this along with the San Diego River Bridge, we do have some plant establishment and revegetation efforts within the creek area and the river area that we're continuing to maintain and ensure that everything comes to our expectations as far as the establishment of landscaping in those areas. The I-5 Genesee Avenue Auxiliary Lane was recently opened late last year. That provides an additional lane to enhance the operations of that section of the Interstate 5 southbound traffic lanes, and essentially picks up from the Genesee on-ramp going southbound, and then terminates and traps off at the La Jolla Village Drive off-ramp. So that is now under operation, and that was, again, closely coordinated with a lot of the improvements that you can see here on the project. Next slide. Here's a view of the Gilman Drive Bridge. This project was partially financed by UC San Diego as well as Sandag. As you can see there's some final improvements being made on the community signage that was approved by Caltrans to be implemented on the bridge structure. The bridge has been open since early last year, and we're finalizing some minor landscaping improvements on that project as we get closer to moving to close out on that. Our Rose Creek bike path, here's a nice aerial view of the independent bicycle bridge that was constructed steel bridge structure. That project is getting, continues to move forward on construction. We have some minor retaining wall systems and some minor paving that needs to be completed, but that again, that is on schedule to be hopefully completed and open for operation in the March-April timeframe of this year. The Voight Drive Improvement Project. This project will realign Campus Point and provide better access to the Voight LRT station. It will provide also some parking lot improvements that will be able to access both sides of the station, either on the east or west side of Campus Point, the new Campus Point that you see there in operation. And then again, we also have provided improvements to the Preuss School parking lot to better facilitate pedestrian circulation and access from our landings on the north side of Voight to get to the bridge and to our trolley station. So this project is still under construction, and we're working very closely with the Midcoast project. Next elements of work scheduled would be the parking lot construction, completion of the roadway improvements, and then advancing to final landscaping of the corridor in that area for both the Midcoast and the Voight project. Due to COVID, our public outreach activities have been modified in accordance with government policies. We are providing project updates through electronic media. As today, we are attending virtual community planning group meetings, and we're ongoing bi-monthly virtual briefings with city council staff. Some significant construction events are covered on multiple news outlets, and we have started very excitedly, we've started opening day planning for the Midcoast project. So we're going to be collaborating with a lot of our stakeholders and starting to see how we can put something together at the end of this year. And our last slide just shows our contact slide. If anybody has any questions, you're certainly welcome to use any of those avenues to learn more about the project and contact staff if you have any questions. So with that, that concludes my presentation, and I am happy to answer any questions.
All right, well, thank you very much, Greg. An excellent presentation, an exciting project. Before we take it back to the committee members for discussion, Francesca, are there any members of the public who'd like to speak on this issue?
No, Chair, I don't see any hands raised.
Thank you very much. Questions for Greg from fellow committee members? Stuart.
Thanks, Mike, and thank you, Greg. Very comprehensive update. It's always exciting to hear about the Midcoast. One thing I'm thinking back to, and this goes back a little while, in a prior update, I recall that there was a particular aspect of the construction, I think it may have been on the Marina Boulevard, I'm not exactly sure, where there was some concern that, whether on temporary or permanent basis, there was some aspect of the construction might lead to some backup of some water that was going to create some still water concerns. Does this ring a bell?
I am not familiar with that issue at all. I have not heard of that. I know that, the Tecolote Creek, we had some construction there. Maybe last time we gave an update on the project, we were doing some gas line work, or actually it was a fuel line work for the Navy in that general vicinity. I believe and we did a lot of precautions to ensure that nothing that we're doing on construction would impact the Bay Area. So I know that we were very sensitive and ensured that our contractor put the necessary improvements in place, or temporary improvements in place, to ensure that flows through the Tecolote Creek would not jeopardize any quality issues or introduce any quality issues to the downstream area. But I don't believe I'm familiar with any other water.
Maybe I'm not remembering that correctly, and I don't know if anybody else recalls, jump in, but maybe, like I said, maybe I'm just not remembering correctly, but if you're not aware, I'm guessing that it probably isn't an issue. Thanks.
Any other questions for Greg? All right, well, seeing none, I'll just thank you and point out that I think we have at least one new member since the last time you came and presented on this this project. And I believe we're getting another new member next month. So, you know, it's, I don't want to bring you back here all the time, but we do enjoy the presentation, and there'll be an opportunity for you to do that again, maybe, you know, 6 months or so. So thank you for the very thorough presentation. All right, with that, we'll close item number 11 and move on to item number 12. This is a presentation from Caltrans. Mohammed, are you available? Oh, Alan. All right, I'm sorry. Mr. Kossep.
Good morning. How are you? Good morning, committee. Wanted to provide an update on construction on Build NCC over the last 6 months. I think last time I was here was in the summer. And so we wanted to provide status on where we are with construction, ongoing risks, and where do we go from in the next 6 months. Next slide. Before I do that, and it is the beginning of the year, I just wanted to sort of highlight that, you know, although today's presentation is focused on the ongoing construction of Build NCC, sort of in the middle of the corridor, Build NCC is part of a larger overall plan to sort of remake the entire corridor, multimodal, multi-agency effort, started really construction in earnest in the middle of last decade. And it sort of begins where Greg's Midcoast ends and runs all the way up to 76. And, you know, a number of rail, pedestrian, environmental, and highway projects were all sort of a part of that overall vision. And this slide really kind of shows you the great progress we've made in the last decade, and making sure that that is a well-rounded approach. And it really is sort of thinking about how transportation can be done moving forward in the other corridors. So when you hear, you know, corridors and they're doing their CMCPs, this really is sort of the goal, to move all of these packages of projects forward in an integrated fashion. They really do build on one another. So I think it's important to kind of highlight the overall success in the corridor at the beginning of the year. Next slide. Zooming into the project that's under construction and we wanted to touch on today, which we refer to as the Build NCC, $850 million project, extends the carpool lanes from Solana Beach up to 78, replaced the rail bridge at San Alejo and double tracked that, added the coastal rail trail, and restored the San Alejo Lagoon. So a number of different elements all baked into one construction project. It was like Midcoast, it's CMGC. It's a joint venture between Skanska, Flatiron, and Stacy Whitback. We refer to them as FSSW. Next slide. And so, you know, the good news is in this approach is you get the efficiencies and the innovation of building all these projects together. But the idea is as pieces are available, you can start on those pieces and open them to the public sooner. So it's not like we have to wait for it all to be done for the public to start seeing value. If you hit the next button, there we go. So far, 3 of the major features are complete and open to the public. The double track was completed in 2019, Coastal Rail Trail, and then in 2020, the lagoon restoration was completed. We're in plant establishment. And so really the remaining elements are the carpool lane extensions up to 78. And this kind of slide shows you this quick status of those, and we'll get into a little bit more detail. Next slide. Before we do, how can we have any conversation these days without talking about COVID and the impacts of COVID? And I do like to share this slide, really thinking about COVID at least 2 different ways. One is just the impact to the economy and the traveling public. And this slide shows the reduction in traffic volumes over the last 12 months relative to pre-COVID year. And, you know, with summer, fall, we were hovering sort of into that minus 15%, probably representing a lot of tourism and just people telecommuting. Since the lockdown in November, that's kind of increased even further, and we're probably in the minus 20 to minus 25% traffic volume. So just as a reference of an indicator of economic health and mobility, I think this slide does well. The other thing is just the health of the project team and how that impacts construction. You know, it is a big team. On any given day, it's a 13-mile long project, and on any given day, we can probably have upwards of 300 people on site. And they're not, you know, always the same people. Some day we have iron workers, and some days we have drillers and framers, carpenters, engineers. So it really is the sphere of influence is probably much bigger than 300. Kudos to the team, the contractor, his employees. Have done a really good job of managing a very difficult situation. Like any company that large or any business that large, we have had folks who have had COVID, but thankfully none of them seriously, and we have been able to move along, and it really hasn't impacted our construction schedule. So that's you know, the one message I wanted to leave. Next slide. Today we'll highlight some of the successes over the last 6 months, and as I said, we'll highlight completion of the lagoon, the active transportation elements that were completed in Encinitas, and then where we are on the highway construction. And then we'll also talk about the outstanding risks that are still there. The foundations, I think we're at the end of that item, and then where we are in funding the last project. Next slide. Before we get into some of the details, I did want to kind of run through some construction slides. If you haven't had a chance, and unfortunately we didn't have an opportunity to do a typical ribbon cutting just because of COVID, but we have had a soft opening on the San Alejo Lagoon restoration. This was some new trails and bridges that were built as a part of that restoration. I'd encourage you, if you have a chance, to go out and walk it. It really is a great facility. Next slide. So the construction is complete. The replaced planting is complete. As indicated by the flags, those are all plants. You're seeing it's greening up nicely. You know, because the lagoon restoration is kind of a very dynamic animal. It's a living animal, right? It's got a long-term plant establishment and monitoring to make sure that we really are effective in creating the right environment and habitats that we were planning to, and potentially tweaking things if needed. But so far, so good. Many species are already coming back, and I know the Nature Collective, who manages the lagoon, have been very happy with how fast species are returning. So that's a good news story. Next slide. On the active transportation front, when we started planning this corridor, we talked a lot about how the rail and the freeway act as a barrier for people moving from the east to the west and north and south. This is a good example. This is at Santa Fe. This is what you saw before the project, and basically people walked behind the barrier. Next slide. And fall of 2020, this is what we opened, and this is what it looks like now. So a huge improvement. Next slide. And then working with the community, installed art as a part of the project, and this was community selected art, and really highlights the partnership that we can do through these real collaborative projects. Next slide. On the highway construction front, in the last 6 months, we completed the inside work. So new lane there, a lot of technology, fiber was built into the new lane. Now we're flipped to the outside and doing the construction on the outside, and that's what you see here. Next slide. As a part of that, we're having to close some of the ramps, interchanges on weekends for what we call super closures, basically 56-hour closures, starting Friday night, finishing Sunday night. So it's been helpful. The one good thing that the lower volumes have been helpful, allowing us to get out there and get in and get out a little bit quicker. And so that's working well, and a good partnership with all of the coastal cities, thanks to Encinitas, Carlsbad, Solana Beach, that we've been really able to plan and work the detours, and it's been going very well. Next slide. So if you've been here for all of my last 4 years of trials and tribulations of building this project, right, the drilling and the foundation work in the lagoon at Manchester has been the most difficult aspect of the project. And that really is because these are the columns that are over 250 feet deep, 10-foot diameter, and we're basically drilling in muck. And so it really is the sort of the tip of technology in terms of building these columns, and they have been a little difficult. And what I mean by that is what happens when you're down that deep is the walls tend to cave in, and it's hard to get a real solid foundation without, a couple times we've had to do them multiple times to get them right. And not something we want to take lightly. So these foundations have been difficult. The good news is we poured our last one in December. There were 17 of them, and so that risk is behind us. And what that means is, we're essentially out of the ground. And on these major construction projects, geotech, utilities, foundations really are the highest risk projects, and that's behind us. And so now we're building false work and, paving and that sort of thing. And that really is relatively lower risk lower risk items. So we feel good about that. Had it been not COVID, we would have definitely had a celebration for our last foundation. Next slide. This is just an example. This is the hole that was drilled, and then the purple cage gets dropped into the hole and then pumped 250 feet, 10-foot diameter, so it's basically a 17-hour pour of concrete into the hole. It's a lot of concrete. Next slide. Last construction photo I did want to share was just sound walls. Sound walls now are beginning to get constructed in Carlsbad, so you see that work going on out there as you drive through. Next slide. So what does it mean from sort of cost and schedule? From a cost perspective, the foundations took us about another 10 months in order to get them done than we originally anticipated. And because of the extra time, they are a little bit more costly than we anticipated. The good news is that we have the contingency. It's within our contingency where we're planning for that risk. And so we're still confident we can deliver the project within budget. When you look at the schedule, the important thing from the carpool lanes is getting them open to at least into Carlsbad. And so there was a little bit of float. The bridge work at Manchester, even though it took us a little longer, is not delaying the opening of the carpool lanes to Palomar. And so by the end of the year, by the end of this year, we anticipate having those lanes open to traffic. So we think that's a good news story. We're sort of neck and neck with the trolley line. So winter of this year will be a great story for San Diego. 2 major construction projects that we've been working on for years will be open to the public. The last project we want to touch on is the Palomar Airport to 78, right? So it extends those carpool lanes another 4 miles from Palomar to 78. This was the project that we've had a bit of a disconnect between when the job was delivered by the engineers and when the money would be available from the state of California. So going back a couple of years ago, when this project was programmed by the California Transportation Commission, based on their cash flow, they weren't able to get us the money until basically July of 22. We were ready in July of 20. So we've been sort of working with them to try to advance that money and get under construction ASAP. Not only would that be great for the traveling public, but there's also a lot of efficiencies working with the contractor since he's mobilized. We think it's significantly cheaper to do it now than to wait. But it's understandable that everyone has revenue crunches, and certainly COVID did not help that. So it's understandable why the commission couldn't advance the funds. So the good news is we've been working with them. Next slide. And we've developed a very innovative approach. Instead of going out with one project, 4 miles, and try to vote it all at one time, we're going to work with the CTC and vote it in 3 pieces based on their ability to advance the funds. They weren't able to advance the whole 90 million or $113 million in one fell swoop, but they were able to advance pieces. With those pieces, we can begin construction and stay on schedule. So basically the idea is annually we'll go back for an additional vote, and the bottom line is that we would be able to finish construction about 10 months after the last vote. And so probably late 22, but we'll actually be open to traffic sooner than that. There are some bike improvements. There are some community enhancements in that phase 3, but the carpool lanes, we think we can get open probably by, I think we're thinking about mid 22. So we're hopeful this will work. We're more than hopeful. I'm confident this will work, but it is a continuing risk and something we continue to monitor. With that, I'll open it up to questions.
Let me unmute. Mr. Kossip, thank you very much. Before we take it back to committee, do we have any members of the general public who'd like to speak on this issue?
No, Chair, I don't see any hands raised.
All right. Well, do we have any members, committee members who would like to ask Mr. Kossip some questions? Let me scroll. Well, I have one. So, Alan, isn't there a little bit of a risk doing a third of a project with a third of the funding available, and then having a second third of a project done with another funding round of funding? What precautions are in place to make sure that we can, get all of the funding on the schedule that they've?
Yeah, it's a great question. And one of our strategies at San Diego has always been to get projects ready to go, because generally in the rest of the state, there's always some flexibility in other people's schedules. So if anyone ever slips in a different county, we're the ones that are there and say, okay, we're ready, please advance our money. We've had a very good track record of that. And in fact, that's how we got this year's allocation, was basically another county blinked and said, we're not going to be able to deliver this year, we're next year. And so we flipped with them. We took their money and they'll take our money. Not to say that will happen every year. I get it. That's definitely a risk, but we've had a good track record with that success. Second point being, if that doesn't work, our fallback is to work with the state and pursue Garvey bonds, which is something we've done in this region before. That's a possibility. Where we're essentially using that future STIP money, and the price of bonds right now are so low that that's a much better cost investment, given the cost of demobbing the contractor, remobbing the contractor, inflation on items and that stuff. If we push it out 2 or 3 years, the interest rate on those Garvey bonds would be a great deal. So that would be our second scenario. Our third scenario is if we have to shut the job down, the work is done behind barrier. We would leave it in a very safe condition for the traveling public, and we wouldn't talk about a long-term closure. It could potentially be 6 months before additional funds were available. So we have at least 3 or 4 different approaches over the next couple of years. But, you know, it definitely is a risk, and that's why we wanted to talk about it and raise people's awareness.
Gotcha. Well, thank you very much. Any other questions for Mr. Kossep from the committee? All right, well, I am not seeing any. So with that, I'll thank you for your presentation. We'll receive and file that issue, and we'll move on to item number 13, which is continued public comment from item number 2. Francesca, are there any members of the public who showed up to speak on issues that are not on today's agenda?
No, Chair, I don't see any hands from the public.
All right, we will close that issue, and we will move on to the final item, which is to set a time certain for our next meeting. Yes, Mr. Nuncio.
Yes, just going back to item 13 and actually to the executive director's report. Jim Linthicum just asked me to relay to you that he looked into the Smart City grant that he reported on, and the field work for that project is scheduled to begin in spring of 2024.
That's good to know. Thank you very much. And thank you for following up.
Yep.
Ariana, so my notes say February 10th, 2021. Is that, oh, there we go. That is still correct. And at 9:30. So we'll stick with the 9:30 time. With that said, are there any final comments from other committee members for the greater good? Staff? All right, well, seeing no hands up, we will adjourn the meeting, and I thank you very much. We will see you in a month.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.